accelerating healing and understanding the true nature of health and healing is something that all of us have as one of our biggest priorities. And one of the things that I teach, and what do people really want in life? What do they really desire? One of those things that all of us have in common on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, is that we want an abundance of energy, well-being, and health, and which all comprises living in a state of healing, living and moving towards wellness versus its opposite, which is illness. Wellness and illness are a duality in our physical world, and today we're going to unravel and expand your thinking and your perception of what healing means. Because so much of what most people equate it with, it's limited to only curing or fixing something that's broken inside of you. It's a very old Newtonian approach, a Newtonian physics where cause leads to effect, that I've got to fix something and make it change. Well, that's important and that's valuable. But there's another state of being where you are healing and changing versus just fixing and curing. You know, there's an expansion beyond that of understanding the true nature of healing and what it represents. And it's not something that you do. See, curing is something I got to focus on and fix, and once it's done, I get back to my old ways. Healing is a state of mind. It is an approach that you take by the way you relate to all four of your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies. We have 4 bodies in this physical domain that we can work with consciously. Now, beyond the physical plane, there's more bodies, but within the physical plane, the one that is most readily available for you to understand, the one that's most readily available for you to work with, and where so much of fixing and curing stops at, is the physical body. You know, you break your arm, yes, go to a doctor, have them reset the bone so that healing can take place. But you see, the resetting of the bone doesn't cause the healing to take place, because even if that bone is not correctly put into its proper alignment, healing starts happening immediately. There's something broken. There is this intelligent wisdom within every cell of your body called your consciousness, called your soul and spirit, the very life force energy that is within all of us. And granted, to various degrees, to various depths, to various levels of healing, but everyone has a relationship with a state of being called healing. Now, what does that look like physically? It's moving away from illness towards wellness. That's easy, right? Where I was once in pain, it's moving from pain into freedom from pain, or peace, or pleasure, however you want to define that. It's about moving from dishonoring and devaluing your body into respecting it, in connecting with it, and seeing the uniqueness of your own physical vehicle, this body that your soul and spirit, your consciousness uses in this lifetime to navigate. So the first level of healing, which is the one that most of us can relate to, where most people, as I mentioned, focus on curing and fixing, is the physical vehicle. Now, there are 3 other bodies beyond the physical. And you see, to become whole, to discover wholeness, is really what healing is all about. Curing is about changing a condition in your body, but healing is about a return to wholeness. To become whole means that all the different parts are functioning together in a synergy, where the wholeness, the oneness of those different parts are greater than the separate parts. It's called synergy. Synergy means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Well, to return to wholeness means I need to honor and value the other 3 bodies, which are often taken for granted. Now, what are those other 4 bodies? Well, the first level, as I mentioned, is the physical, and everyone here has a relationship with their physical body. Whether it's good or bad, it's still a relationship. You have one, and you can improve that. You can take care of that physical body, and you all know how to do that. I'm not going to go into a class today talking about nutrition and exercise and sunshine and, all the things necessary about maintaining your physical body, because you can Google that, you can figure that out. And why it's important, and this is just a little hint here, why it's important and why there are so many diets and so many approaches to taking care of your physical body is because there's not just one answer for everybody. There's not just one, just do this diet, just take this vitamin, just eat this kind of way that works for everybody. You know why? Because you are a unique and powerful spiritual being. You've always been. And in that uniqueness, you need to listen and honor your own body, to see what works for your chemistry, for your body, for your digestion, for your respiratory, for all the different levels in your body. You need to pay attention to what works for you. You see, there's a big debate, again, like, for instance, with the vaccines out there. You know, everybody says, oh, just get the vaccine. Science backs it up. It's got to be good for everybody. Simple answer. The ego loves a simple answer. But the truth is, there are some people that have allergic reaction to peanuts. Right? Not everybody. So if a person who loves peanuts saying, oh, just eat peanuts, they're great, they're the best thing, everybody should eat peanuts. But there are some people that have an allergic reaction. It's the same with a vaccine. So you have to listen to your intuition. You have to listen to your body's wisdom to see if what that is right for you. Because just because it might be right for the majority, it doesn't mean it's right for you. And that's where people tend to want the simple answer. They don't want to think and feel, as I've said, because the ego resists that. And because they resist that, and they don't allow themselves to honor the other three levels of their body, they end up curing and trying to fix, rather than healing, changing, and evolving. Because healing is a return to wholeness, and wholeness is about respecting and honoring your emotional body as well as your physical body. It's about honoring and respecting your mental body, your mental capacity, your mind. It's also, and this is so important, about honoring and respecting your spirituality, your spiritual body. You see, those other three bodies are energy that are less easy to measure, so therefore the ego doesn't want to be bothered trying to figure that out. But it is essential to returning to wholeness. It's essential to awaken the aliveness and the life force energy that you were born with. You ever notice a little kid, how full of energy they are? You know, when they're 2 or 3 years old, they're just bounding with energy. You can't make them sit still, right? They're just so full of that aliveness of their soul and their spirit. Now, in time, as they go through the process of being shamed and dealing with life, and they start changing their beliefs, that life force energy starts to diminish, dwindles down. And depending on the intensity of that, ignoring their spirituality, not understanding how the mind works, and being told and taught and conditioned to ignore and to not feel your feelings, cutting off this life force energy that flows from the spirit through the mind into the body. And when the mind is distorted, when the mind is twisted, the energy of your soul and spirit is limited. It doesn't have the vitality to reach all the way down into the depth of your physical body, which is what is essential for any fixing or curing. All fixing and curing relies upon your inner soul and spirit, the life force energy, to take the action upon creating and returning to that well-being and balance. So today we're going to explore and uncover and expand within you your perception of what it means to become whole, and in that pursuit of wholeness to experience greater healing and well-being. And it's not something that you do and check off your list. Oh yeah, I cured that illness. I cured that disease back in, 1975 or whatever. And that's how the other paradigm of the Newtonian physics of fixing and curing looks at it as a one-time thing. Let me get back to being normal. Not let me get back to healing and evolving and growing and changing. No, that's not normal. Let me get back to what was when I was free of pain. Let me get back to what was when I didn't have that cancer. Let me get back to what was when I didn't have arthritis. Let me get to back what was, not really looking at the mental, emotional, spiritual components of what wellness and well-being is all about. And so we're going to expand that within your consciousness just by sitting back and listening and opening up to think and feel about what I'm talking about and looking how you can improve your relationship with those other three bodies. You know, I actually wrote articles for Body, Mind, Spirit magazine back in the day. This is an old magazine back in the 80s, I think, or 90s. And the idea, the concept of body, physical, mind, and then spirit, right? Spirit. Spiritual is always considered above, right? The physical is grounded into the earth below. And what is the bridge between the spiritual and the physical is your mind. And so your relationship with your mind, body, mind, I call it soul and spirit, but body, mind, spirit is so important to heal. And if you only focus on the conditions physically, let me take the medications, let me bandage this wound, let me clean the wound, let me do all the physical things, and I don't allow the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual healing, then that healing process is slowed down. Not eliminated, but is slowed down. And today you're going to learn to accelerate your healing, whether it's a physical malady, whether it is not quite yet precipitated as a physical malady, which means it's on the mental emotional level. Because when there is conflict in your consciousness, when there is a lack of wholeness in your mind, it's going to play out physically eventually. Not immediately, but it will eventually. As I've talked about in other classes, and we're going to go into depth today about the emotional healing, because that's where most people have been taught and conditioned. Oh, I don't have time for that. I feel okay. I feel fine. I feel okay. How are you? I'm good. Those aren't emotions. I'm good. I'm fine. They're not a feeling. I'm happy. I'm sad. I feel joyous. I feel in expectation. I feel inspired. I feel lonely. I feel hurt. I feel disconnected. Again, is not really an emotion, disconnected, but it tries to describe a feeling of emptiness. And we've been so taught and conditioned to just label our emotions, and that's the next level that is the closest to the physical. You see, that's the densest, the most dense is the physical body. You can touch, you can measure it, you can do all kinds of things. You can lose weight and gain weight, right? You can lose hair, you can gain hair. You can see that and measure that. That's what the ego focuses on, because the ego is only here to manage the 5 physical senses and what you can grasp. And it often denies the more real, and when you hear that word, the more real part of you, which is your emotional body. And why I call it more real is because the emotional body will continue. If you were hurt or rejected in childhood, what's real about your past isn't what happened back then. It's what's happening to you right now, meaning that fear that's still alive within your emotional body, that still is having impact on your actions, on your willingness to express yourself, on your willingness to connect with others. That happened in the past where you were rejected, but it's not the cause of it. It's your fear of it happening in the future. So your emotional body is eternal until you manage and deal with it. And unfortunately, we live in a world that does everything to avoid healing that second level called your emotional body. And it's certainly true that one of the reasons why people resist it is because when you start to become conscious of how you're truly, genuinely feeling, the emotions on the surface that are there to be released and cleared are the negative ones, often described as negative. I call them constricting or tightening. The tightening, constricting emotions, sadness, sorrow, hurt, disappointment, loneliness, fear, anxiety, guilt, anger, shame. I mean, we could go on, right? Those all are emotions that tighten and constrict, but they get your attention, don't they? Now, a lot of people will do everything in their power, and there's free will choice to ignore those tightening, constricting feelings. And that's often what the first experience of dealing with your emotional body is. That's why people say, oh no, I've tried that emotional stuff. It's ugly, it's painful. And they think that's all that's there. That's all that's there. But no, that's what's on covering over top of it. The first step into the shallow end of the pool is the constricting emotions. And when you can be willing to seek to understand them, be willing to feel them and express them and release them, they no longer are on the surface. And then the deeper emotions, such as joy, love, freedom, enthusiasm, aliveness, gratitude, can surface from the depth of your being. Because it's those, quote, expanding emotions. Constricting are the anger and the ones often called negative. And the, quote, positive ones are often the expansive emotions. Those lie at the depth of your emotional being. That's why a lot of people will play out and pretend or go through the motions of, oh yeah, I'm grateful, I feel gratitude, I'm thankful, yes, thank you this, thank you that, thank you this. Every time somebody says, oh, I appreciate it, I appreciate it, I appreciate it, they don't feel anything. They're just saying the empty words because they're conditioned that's what, the polite thing is to do. However, and that's when people go and do the law of attraction. They say, just feel gratitude, your life will change. And they're like saying the word and thank you and appreciation, but they don't feel it. And then they're like, why the hell isn't this working? I'm so angry that the law of attraction isn't working. Well, maybe because that anger is on top of the other emotions deeper, and that's what you're trying to avoid feeling, so you never get access to the depth of your feelings. So this second layer of emotional body is the most, second to the most dense. It's the ones that you can't deny when you feel hurt or lonely or pain. You can't deny that that is a tangible experience, although you can't really measure it. You can't say that, oh yes, today I have about 85% love going on and about 15% anger and about 5%, You can't measure and show me a quantitative amount of your love or anger or fear. Now you can demonstrate it and express it, but you can't measure it like you can your physical body. When a bone is broken and you take an x-ray, you can measure the results. And that's why it's a little bit more subtle and challenging for most people to even see the value of their emotional body, because it's so easy to dismiss it. And why it's so easy is we've been taught and conditioned to do that. We've been taught and conditioned to ignore how you feel, especially when you dip your toe into that shallow end of the pool of emotion called your emotional body, and you start to feel that old resentment and anger that you have done everything in your power to avoid for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So you don't want to deal with it. And that lack of responsibility, that lack of dealing with the emotions is what causes the greatest form of illness and dis-ease, emotional ease or emotional dis-ease. Now, because of the emotional level often ignored and denied, the key to understanding and the key to motivating yourself to begin to heal on that level is to realize your emotions will be expressed eventually. They will either be expressed emotionally by turning your attention, feeling, going into the depth of that anger or hurt or pain, feeling it, squeezing the energy, hear that word, the energy, which is neutral like electricity, taking the energy trapped in that emotions to set it free so that that energy can go into the physical domain and start to accelerate the healing process. But emotions that are repressed and emotions that are constricted contain energy that you need for your wholeness and wellness. So that's why emotional healing is essential. And as I mentioned, eventually you will express your emotions. You either will express it emotionally, which is the least damaging, or ignored, left unattended, denied and repressed. You will express that emotion physically through crippling arthritis, through pain, emotional pain that becomes physical pain, through illness, dis-ease, through lack of energy. All of the emotions, and that's one of the keys, is they will be eventually expressed. And if you don't express it on an emotional level, which is much more manageable, then eventually you'll deal with the anger, the resentment and the anger of dealing with cancer. Why did God do this to me? I'm so angry. Well, eventually you got to feel your anger, didn't you? It wasn't God's plan. It wasn't your soul and spirit causing you to do that. But your soul and spirit did say eventually you've got to deal with this anger. It's blocking you from your wellness, your wholeness, your well-being. It's blocking you from connecting to your soul and spirit, from your destiny, from the depth of emotion, from your power and strength. So when we don't deal with things mentally, emotionally, it eventually precipitates to get our attention. And it doesn't happen immediately. There's time and space so that you can learn and you have the opportunity to heal on the appropriate levels. Because when you can become whole, you not only respect and honor your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and your spiritual body, but you see the value of how they all work together. They all work together. The source of your life, of your being alive, having aliveness, is your soul and spirit. And most in our world have denied the soul. Talk about spirit a little bit, but deny the connection to the goddess, the soul, and to God, the spirit. Because religion, unfortunately, has twisted and distorted what spirituality is supposed to mean. In so many ways, and I love this definition. I heard it from Shirley MacLaine. She said, religion is man's attempt, not women, man's attempt, the masculine dominating chauvinistic energy, man's attempt to manipulate and control your spirituality. That's the definition of religion. And unfortunately, in a world of masculine chauvinism that denies the feminine, that denies the feelings, emotions are feminine energy. Another reason why people don't deal with their emotions, they don't matter. It doesn't matter what you, it's just that feeling stuff. Women are supposed to feel, men aren't supposed to feel. The feminine energy, so crippled, so twisted and distorted, that is the leading source of illness and lack of well-being in our world. And it deals with the emotional body. The mind, the mental body, is more of a masculine expression. The thinking, the thoughts are fast and quick. You can think. You can only think one thought at a time. They're very powerful and very, fast. Spirit in you is fast and dynamic. Somebody who's spirited. The spirit of America, the freedom, the possibilities, the energy of that dynamic force of masculine energy. Pure spirit. I'm not talking about this twisted chauvinistic masculine. I'm talking about the pure, beautiful masculine energy that each and every one of us have contained within your spirit. But because the mind is the regulator, you can deny it. Because you have free will choice, you can ignore it. You can pretend it doesn't matter. And you can end up separating and forgetting who you are. And that always leads to illness versus wholeness. That always leads to disconnection versus belonging and connection. So the emotional body is the next level of density. Then the third is the mind. The mind is harder. It's more difficult to define, to understand. The mind is fast. And most people fixate on their mind because it's the masculine energy and it's much more socially acceptable. Don't feel your feelings. Just go be logical and reasonable. Just think about it. Look what you did in the past and analyze, evaluate, think, and then take action. Don't feel. Do everything to avoid your feelings. And so many people are arrested in their mind of their mental capacity, and they do everything because of their beliefs, which is in the mind, their attitude, and their thoughts are to avoid their feelings. They've been taught and conditioned that, just be positive. A positive person, right? Positive attitude, right? Is not to feel negative emotions. Well, that's not what it means to be positive. To be positive is to value the wholeness of your being. To know that your emotions, they are sometimes constricting and also expansive. And that constricting isn't negative. It's not unspiritual to have constricting emotions. But because of the beliefs, because of the judgments, because of the thoughts that people have conditioned you to believe, we often judge our emotions, and that's what separates us from being able to access them. But the mind needs to shift and change its perspective. The mind needs to say, the most positive thing I can do and be, the most positive thing is to be real. Meaning to be whole. Meaning that I live in a world of duality where things expand and constrict. And emotions expand, feel good. The ones that constrict don't feel so good. But they're both equally valuable. The most positive thing you can do is to be honest with yourself. It's our dishonesty, it's the believing the lie, it's the conditioning that teaches us don't feel anything but positive emotions. It's impossible. You've got to be whole and willing. You've got to be whole and willing to feel all of your emotions. Because there's power in your emotional body. You know, there's a Bible verse that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Again, the chauvinism of the Bible. Man, masculine. I don't talk about the feminine, but any person, as a person thinketh in his or her heart, so are they. What does that mean? As a man thinks with feeling. It's the feeling that is the energy that catapults that thought into manifestation. And most of people that are cut off emotionally have learned to judge and ignore and deny their emotions. They also realize they've ignored and denied their power. Your emotions are your power, and they are the bridge necessary to reopen, to access that life force energy, the life force of your soul and spirit. So the mind is about changing your beliefs. It's about just redefining what it means to be positive, not to ignore any emotions that are constricting in order to try to focus on being positive, being grateful, being happy all the time. Oh, look how happy I am. Look how grateful I am. And you know people that are performing that, right? You can tell there's hurt, there's pain, there's sorrow in their eyes, but they're just so much trying to be a positive person. And if you have ever done that, which I've done in the past, it's exhausting long term. To be real is to say, yeah, I'm going to be positive by being honest that today I feel sad. And I want to explore that sadness. Because often, and here's one of the clues of why people resist their spirituality and flock to religions, is because the soul, when you start to open to your soul, one of its qualities and characteristics, the feminine energy of your soul, and its vital feeling nature, when you start to open your heart, the first thing most people feel is sorrow, sadness. And because we've judged sadness and sorrow as not being happy, therefore it's bad and wrong, it's not. It's called being real. And when you can watch the evening news and you see what's happening in our world, your soul grieves and feels the sorrow and the pain of others going through the injustice of the human condition, the injustices of a lack of human dignity. A person of soul feels and are willing to feel their sadness and sorrow. And it is from that sadness and sorrow that compassion is born. Compassion is born. And our world is in a crisis of compassion, lacking it, so desperately needing and wanting it and lacking it at the same time. Compassion is an emotion that is born of having known sorrow. And when you don't allow yourself to know sorrow, to know sadness, to feel connected to your soul, and granted, your soul is not just sadness and sorrow. It also rejoices in any act of human kindness and love. Your soul, when it sees an act of human kindness, something so simple, a news report of somebody who went out of their way to help another person, you feel the joy of your soul. And so your soul is not just the sorrow, but that's usually what most people feel when they first open up to their soul, because there's been so much sorrow they've repressed and denied and ignored. And your soul says you got to cleanse and clear that out to open your heart, to truly find your destiny. So you have 4 physical bodies. Physically is the one that you can identify, and you can Google what to do. You can listen to your body wisdom to make sure that this diet or this vitamin or this miracle food is going to help your body. But don't just take it automatically because you've been bought the propaganda of advertisement. But listen to your body. Listen to its wisdom. It'll tell you what's good for you and not. The second is the emotional body, which is where I find when I work with my clients, most people have the most difficult or have not yet explored that realm. And when they do, it opens the floodgates of energy for accelerating your healing process. A few years back, I had a client, and she had gone to the doctors, and her thyroid was like practically zilch on producing the hormones that it needed. And so it was like the doctor did measurements and was putting her on medication, and they were going to do surgery on her thyroid. Well, she came to me. I was working in a chiropractic office at the time, and the doctor had recommended her to me, and I talked to her. We did a session. I think we did 2 sessions. And I told her about what that represents on, her physical body, physical throat, deals with the throat chakra. The throat chakra is about expression. Well, she had not expressed her emotions in 25, 30 years. And so I gave her techniques, and I taught her, and I showed her the value and expanded her belief system about why it's important for her to work on this, that this can help get the energy flowing back into that area of her body. So she did the exercises. She was very diligent. She came back like 2 weeks later. Now her surgery was scheduled for like a month or 6 weeks out. It wasn't immediate. So she worked with me in between. Then she went back to the doctor, and they ran tests again because she'd been taking her medication. And the doctor was like confounded because of the levels were back to normal within like a very quick, fast period of time. When she learned to express rather than repress, when she unblocked the energy flow, her body knows what to do to restore itself. She didn't need to have surgery. And so she didn't. And she recovered. But my point being in that story is to understand the value and the importance of how closely connected your emotional body is to your physical. So much so that every emotion you feel and every thought that you think has an immediate physical, chemical response. Every thought you think and every emotion you feel has influence and impact on your physical body. That's why when you feel embarrassed, right? Somebody embarrasses you, immediately what? The blood flows to your cheeks and you blush. That's an immediate physical response. And I've taught the body-mind-spirit connection, and people say, oh, the mind doesn't matter. It doesn't, it's just the mind. It doesn't have impact on my physical. The mind over body doesn't have any impact, doesn't it? Have you never had a sexual fantasy? Every sexual fantasy has an immediate physical response. You see, the mind and the body are one. And when you can bring them back together, instead of what we've been taught and conditioned to segregate them out, here's my body, that's all that matters. My emotions, I got to ignore those, deny them. Be positive, don't ever feel anything that's constricting. No. Your soul and spirit, I don't know what that stuff is. It's religion, it's all that stuff. So I throw the baby out with the bathwater of religion and lose my connection to soul and spirit and ignore and deny it, which they are patient. They'll wait for you until you choose, once again, free will choice, to reconnect, to allow for healing, to allow for changing. It is the process of what it means to return to wholeness, is that I need to value my spiritual, my mental, my emotional, and my physical bodies, knowing how they're interconnected and how they relate to each other. Now, does anybody have any questions so far on this accelerated healing process of understanding, valuing, and knowing the relationship essential to return to wholeness, which is called healing. Healing is a return to wholeness. It's not about fixing and curing. Curing is fixing a condition physically. But without the benefit of healing, that's why cancers go into remission. You can do physical things to manipulate it for a while, but if you haven't healed the consciousness that creates and allows cancer to take place, it'll come back. It has to. Not to punish you, but to let you know the healing hasn't taken place yet. You didn't fail. You did all the right things physically, perhaps, but did you work on your emotional body? Did you heal and bring the synergy of the emotional body? Because when you do, the physical body has to change. Just like when you get embarrassed, your physical body has to produce more blood flow going to your cheeks. It is a relationship. And most only focus on the physical and ignore the metaphysical, that which is beyond the physical. And that which is metaphysical healing, is dealing with the wholeness of your being, dealing with the mind, which is beyond the physical body, dealing with your emotions, dealing with your soul and spirit you can't measure. It's the metaphysical, beyond the physical, that is the key to wholeness, your key. And so if you currently are struggling with a physical condition, opening up to expand, and the next most important level to work on is your emotional body, to clear it out. And in order to do that, you need to have an attitude and a belief that that's important, that matters. And also an attitude and belief that you have a resource of energy called your spirituality, that you have a resource of soul and spirit that you can tune into and access and expand. And as you ask, as you connect with your soul and spirit, they know exactly where the blockage is in your body. They know exactly what condition in your mind you've been taught to believe that limits and inhibits the flow of energy all the way down into the tangibility of your body. And they can help you. But you have to ask, and you have to be willing to see the value of that. So back to any questions real quick. Farnaz says, yes, Mikhail, I feel sadness of others always. Was like that as a child in order to connect. Yeah, it's a level of compassion. And it's important to be able to manage that. To have the boundaries of when to connect and when to feel the sorrow and when to feel your own body. Because sometimes you can blur the boundaries and it's hard to know what your feelings are compared to other people. So it's important to be able to understand that and to work with that as well. So it's valuable and it allows you to be a caring and compassionate person indeed. But you don't want to get lost in the sea of the emotions of everybody out there. And it's challenging at times. I know that myself. It's very challenging to know where my emotions end and other people's begin. When you have a connected, deep connection with other people. But you can discover that with time, with patience, with understanding. So that's very important. Monica Sati, cool. And it's raining in Texas. Woohoo! That's fantastic. I wish it would rain in San Francisco. We need rain here too. Some parts of the country are getting a lot of rain. If we could just figure out how to distribute all that rain in certain pockets that's too much into the areas that are not enough, we would be in a good condition in our country. Any other? Accelerating your healing. It's about some of the keys I've talked about is about understanding that healing is different than curing and fixing. Healing involves changing your consciousness, which is the more real part of you. As I mentioned, your emotions are eternal until you change them. Your emotions will continue. What's real about your past is the emotional impact that it had upon you today. And that's still what's alive about the past, is how I feel about myself today and what I project into the future today. The mind is your consciousness, and your soul and spirit is eternal. And so is your mind, your consciousness, and so are your emotions. And so that's why I talked about these other three bodies, beyond the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, are the more real part of you. And when you can heal and change your consciousness, when you can heal and change your emotions, your physical body has to respond. It has to change. It's not a hope or a wish or a maybe. Because when you change the energy within you, when you change your emotions, when you release repressed emotion, when you change the way you think about them, you free up the life force energy to flow now into the other most dense of your bodies, called the physical. So accelerating healing is to know that healing is a return to wholeness. And to be whole physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually is what we're talking about. And on a physical level, the return to wholeness is moving from illness into wellness. On an emotional level, a return to wholeness on an emotional level is to honor and value all of the emotional feelings that you have. The constricting, tightening ones and the expansive ones equally. That's wholeness. That's honoring and respecting your emotional body, because your emotions are there to give you feedback and guide you into your future. They're there to guide you about what to do and what actions to take. And so on an emotional level, wholeness is honoring and respecting both the constricting and expansive emotions. Mentally, wholeness is about knowing and honoring your consciousness. Being conscious of your consciousness. Being conscious of the mind that you occupy. And that mind is made up of your attitude, your beliefs, your thoughts, and your feelings. And it's from that you take action in your life. And a person who is mentally in dominion, who has mental wholeness, sees and honors the value of what their thoughts are, and their attitude, and their beliefs, and how it has impact on their emotions, and their emotions have impact on their physical. So there's a relationship. To return to wholeness mentally is to honor your mind. And then spiritually is to move beyond the limitations that you've been taught and conditioned by religion to say that God is a man. God is this powerful old man with a beard looking down, watching your genitals to make sure you don't have too much fun. Some of the old antiquated religious ideas. You're here to suffer and to struggle. That's what life is about. And then one day you'll get rewarded in heaven with streets of gold, and you'll sit up there and watch all the sinners down there gnashing their teeth. Wow, that sounds like a great way. That's exactly where I want to end up. To shake loose the limitations of religion, to discover the genuineness of your spirituality, that you have a soul and spirit within you, that Goddess isn't just up there. You connect to the Goddess through your soul, and you connect to God through your spirit, and they are within you. And you need to learn how to relate to that part of you, and they will never abandon you or forsake you. You abandon it, you forsake it, but it doesn't abandon you. Your soul and spirit unconditionally loves you. Doesn't matter what you've done, what beliefs you've held, they unconditionally love you. And when you can recognize and receive their love and value their wisdom and access their light and energy, you bring it from a concept in your mind into the emotional feeling nature of feeling your connection to the divine. And then that changes your biology, your physicality. It enlivens you. It brings the life force energy, sparking it to another height and a new level that you once had as a child. That boundless energy, that boundless passion. But now, consciously choosing it as an adult, ignites and accelerates any healing, fixing, or curing that you have on your agenda. That's what wholeness is about. Honoring your soul and your spirit, shaking loose of the chauvinism that says the spirituality is about masculine energy. No, it isn't. It's also about your soul. It's about being spiritual and doing things based on that spirituality. It's about honoring your mind, its power and perception to change your attitudes, your beliefs, and your thinking, to focus on reprioritizing what matters to you, to not just fixate on the physical, but to expand, to see the value of changing emotionally and mentally and spiritually, to return to wholeness. Those are the keys to accelerate your own healing so that you can return to wholeness. Healing and changing are always together. Fixing and curing doesn't always produce change. It doesn't always produce change. But you came here to grow, to evolve, and to change, to become more of who you are. And so your life is not a static process. And often curing and healing is about, let me get back to what it was. Not about becoming more. It's about going back to what I once was. And there's value in healing and curing. When, and it happens when, automatically when the healing life force energy is present. Then you don't have to be so fixated on what modalities out there I need to focus on. And don't get me wrong, it's invaluable to work with your doctor. If you have a life-threatening illness and challenging disease, it's important to look at it from all four levels. I'm not saying just do the spiritual, mental, emotional, and ignore your physical. That's just as out of balance. It's about bringing them all together. So there's a synergy of wholeness that takes place. And that's when the life force can be sparked in every cell in your body. And you can be free from the pain of the past. And you can be free to experience the joy of healing and knowing that you are a different person, having gone through that challenge of healing and changing, that you can become more, and that you can access the vitality of your soul and spirit. You can access the abundance of energy that is often, as I mentioned, trapped, repressed in the emotional body. And when you can unhook it and expand it, your physical changes, your energy changes, your chemistry changes. You feel different and are different.